If you're listening to this, you're a paid subscriber to the Stoic Mom Project. Questions for this Q&A were submitted by members of our online learning community. If you're not already part of that community and would like more information, you'll find it by visiting the SMP Community Center tab at stoicmom.substack.com. This Q&A is with Dr. Maggie Goldsmith. The title of the main interview with Dr. Goldsmith is The Painful and Scary Task of Separation and was published on November 9th. I'm excited to share Maggie's answers to the SMP community's questions. Okay, well, let's dive in. And as you know, Maggie, these questions are submitted by community members. And so that is one of the benefits of being in the community is the moms in there get to submit their questions to podcast guests. And so I've clustered them a little bit according to topic, right? Questions that seem similar to each other. Most of these were submitted prior to our first conversation, but I still feel like they'll really give you an opportunity to expand on and reinforce, like what our first conversation was about. And of course they're all somewhat related, but they're good questions. My community members write good questions. So yeah. All right. So this first one is, I would like to know more about managing my own emotions and what I should share and what I should keep to myself. Do our opinions matter? I wonder if my kid will ever really care what she put us through. An end goal is for her to be happy and healthy, but I wouldn't mind feeling happy and healthy myself.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to approach that in as holistic a way as I can, I think that ultimately each individual is responsible for their own happiness and well-being, health. So if you're going to be happy and healthy, it's probably going to be the result of your own efforts towards yourself and much less, something that your child is going to offer you or enable you to do. The way I've always said it is, what do parents want? And I think about what I've wanted as a parent. And as a parent, what I want is for my children to be productive, well-adjusted adults who have room in their lives as adults for me. And so I feel like if that relationship is there and it's sort of worked at and tended to, that's hopefully where we end up. We end up, two adults sitting across the table from each other, wanting to be there rather than being there because you feel obligated or because you need something. It's really, that's the goal. That's like, that's the moment of transcendence for a parent is, being there and experiencing that there is your child, a fully individuated, well-adjusted adult sitting across the table from you and giving you their time and enjoying them with you. So I think that, it doesn't really answer your question directly. It kind of answers your question in a roundabout kind of way in saying that really you have to tend to yourself. You have to tend to yourself.
It makes me think of relationships in general. That
Yeah.
when you are a whole healthy person, you're attractive. People want to be around you. And this goes for your kids too.
Well, you can also, when you're a whole, healthy person, you can be alone. That's the thing. You can be on your own. You can enjoy your solitude. You can, be moved by little things. So that's the other thing that is so important is, once you've grieved through life, once you've grieved all the losses, once you've let go, that there's so much that you can't control. once you've sort of embraced that, there's so much freedom at the end of that. And at the end of that, the freedom that comes is these like fleeting moments of transcendence is what I like to call them, because they are
Hmm.
fleeting. Happiness is not something that can stay. It's not something that can be a consistent, or that would be manic if we were happy all the time. But happiness, I think, comes in like instances like, you know, I don't know, like I talk about going to Philadelphia and like, or going to Philadelphia where the Metropolitan Bakery is. And this is a stop I always make whenever I'm in that part of the world. Going to the Metropolitan Bakery and grabbing a millet muffin that you can only get there.
Hmm.
And that to me is a moment of transcendence, that it's
Hmm.
always there. I can access it, and I don't need anyone else in order to enjoy this, in order to really sort of deeply connect there. So it's these little things that become so meaningful, and these things are meaningful whether or not your child decides to fully transition or detransition, or all of that. I don't know, like a piece of music that you love to listen to suddenly comes on and you're like, yes. There are so many like little bits of humanity that come to you, and
Yes.
so I think that's how it works, is you just you just keep going through it, and you keep growing, and you keep grieving. You grieve all of those losses, and you come to terms with the fact that like some things just aren't going to be the way you imagined them.
Hmm.
You're not going to be who you thought you were. You're not going to, like there's no more pretense. And then you find freedom in that. You're like, okay,
Hmm.
so I'm just going to get on with it.
That's so
Does that make
true. That's
sense?
where the release. Oh, it makes complete sense to me. I know. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes. And there is such freedom in that because you've let go, right? Before you're grasping, you're gripping onto these
Yeah.
outcomes that you don't have control over. And it keeps you sort of chained to the circumstance,
There's a
and it's sort
fantastic,
of, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
there's a wonderful paper written by this psychoanalyst whose name was Emmanuel Gent,
Mm,
Ghent. And he wrote a paper that I read like once a year, if not twice a year. And it's basically about surrender.
yes. Surrender. Yes.
It's basically about surrender and what the difference is between surrendering and sort of being subjected to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a surrender is something that puts you in the first person. You are the doer. You are the agent. And you are choosing to
Yes.
surrender, as opposed to being sort of forced to surrender, um, or forced to like give in,
Sounds
or
to me like you're
forced.
talking about, yeah, like the difference between being a victim of your circumstance
Yes,
or letting go of outcomes and
that's
releasing yourself. Yes.
that's right. That's right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Ooh, I
Um,
would love that. Would you mind sharing that with me?
yeah,
And I could share it with my,
I'm sure it's on my bookshelf somewhere. If you give me a
okay.
moment. No, that's not it.
Well, and if you could maybe, I don't know, send it to me later or something, that would be
I
great.
will. That's fine.
There's another part of this question that I want to come back to, because this
Mhm.
was something I was hoping we'd hit in the main interview. And that is, I wonder if my kid will ever really care about what she put us through.
Mm, so now let me respond as a mom. Let me respond as a mother to this
Mhm.
question. And, does my daughter care what she put me through? I think in some ways she does, and in some ways she doesn't. And I think that, like, sort of understanding what you put someone through takes a great deal of maturity,
Mhm.
and it takes a lot. Like your kid might get there, but
Mhm.
she or he might not.
Right.
Like she might grow. Like one of the things I said, I think was it during our conversation, or was it during the wider lens conversation, where I said, I didn't appreciate my mom until I had my own kids,
Yeah, same.
and I
Mhm.
realized like how hard this thing is.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, if they go on, and eventually they have to become mature functioning adults, right? That's what we hope. I think eventually they come to a place where recognizing what they did is not going to destroy them,
Mhm.
because I think there is a moment where traumatizing someone is traumatizing of the self.
Mhm.
There's this other book, like all my books now. There's this other book called On Killing. I think it was written. It,
Mm.
it looks at the different, like, wars, I think, through history, and how there is a difference in killing someone with a knife or killing someone from a drone,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and how, for example, people who use drones to, like, bomb places are just as traumatized as people who, like, went in with bayonets in World War I
Hmm.
somehow. Um, and even though they're the aggressor, they're still traumatized by this knowledge that there's a human life being ended there.
Mm.
And that's
Mhm.
too much for them to bear.
Mhm.
What is trauma
Mhm.
other than something that's too much to bear? So I
Mhm.
think that our children are traumatized by this whole thing as well. And they're
Yes.
traumatized by what they've done to you.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think that it takes a lot of maturity and growth on their part to be able to say, I understand how hard that was for you. And,
Mhm.
and it can take several different, forms. Like my child, I remember in the very beginning, she said, "You won, okay, you won." When
Mhm.
she decided that she was no longer trans identified. And I remember feeling like, what did I win? I didn't win anything. This wasn't about winning.
Mhm.
So it
Mhm.
went from that to now, you know, like she is so loving towards me, and she does like these little things, and that's how I know that
Mm. Mhm.
it's that kind of a thing. It's not, you're never going to get, Mom, I know this was really hard. I'm so sorry, that this was, and like, what would the point of that be anyway? Like, it wouldn't be satisfactory. It would be so much more satisfactory. Again, like I said, it would be so much more meaningful to sit with your adult child who you can have an actual conversation with, you know,
Mhm.
deeply meaningful connection with as adults. I think that's, you know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
I'm thinking, yeah, I do. I tototally do. I'm also, my mind is going to this place of they're also just doing their work right now. They're figuring
yeah,
things out. They're
yeah,
going through a really difficult time
yeah,
themselves,
yeah.
and it is our job as moms to hold that
Mhm,
space without
mhm.
any expectation that they're going to know what we're doing. That's kind of when we know we're doing it well, is when we don't need them
Right,
to recognize what we're doing, you
right.
know.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. No, there's the recognition won't come in a sort of statement, if
Yeah.
you will. It will come in them living their lives,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
again, and having making room in their lives for you.
Yeah. 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 So good. Okay. There's one more piece in here that I am going to lift up again just because it's related to the next question. So I'll read that and then I'll I'll read the next question that piggybacks on it. So it was that, do our opinions matter? Right. And then this other mom specifically piggybacking, like she said that, what to share and what to keep to ourselves. I'm wondering if Maggie thinks it's ever a good idea to just be honest with our kids about our views on gender. And if so, how do you know when the time is right to share your views more directly?
So this is a very specific thing. Um, how do you know? Well, I can say that you've probably tried to directly share things, your opinions with your child before, and maybe not even about gender, and you've seen how that goes.
Mm.
Um, and that could be like a guide as to what you're going to get back when you share your opinion on, the horrors of gender, of transitioning. Is there ever a time? I mean, it depends on you, it depends on your kid, it depends on the moment, and it depends on how it's expressed. If it's expressed in terms of like, you know, you don't have the right information, this is the right information, you need to read this, that's not going to do it. If it comes in the form of, I'm really, really anxious about this, I'm
Mhm.
really nervous, I'm, like, I don't want you to be hurt. I don't want you to be, I'm worried, as opposed to, this is the dumbest thing, like if it gets treated like it's a judgment of them,
Yes.
they're not going to be able to hear it. If it's expressed as like, look, you're free to think and do what you want, but this is what I believe, and I'm really worried and frightened for you. That's a different thing. You know,
Hmm.
Again, they might say, piss off, I'm going to do what I want anyway, but that depends on the relationship you have with your kid. Like if all their lives they're listening to how what they're doing is wrong and not well informed,
Hmm.
then they're going to take this as yet another instance of, they're wrong, you're telling them they're wrong and misinformed and they need to do things your way. They're not going to be able to hear that. But um I've said before, like, if telling them, if giving them this information was going to help, it probably already would have helped
Hmm.
somehow.
Hmm.
you know
Hmm.
um I don't think it's about a lack of information or a lack of understanding. It it's in the relationship. It's in the relationship. I think that, the more you work on that part of it, the part of, the more you set it up so that they can hear what you have to say, you know
And it's really an opportunity, I think, to do that individuation dance.
yeah.
For
Mm-hmm.
some of these kids, they haven't ever had mom approach them with that sort of attitude of you're wrong and I'm right and you need to
Yeah.
listen to me. They've never had that dynamic with mom before, and now suddenly there's
Yeah.
this thing,
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. There's that
Yeah.
too. It's like you've always let me do whatever I want. Why now are you, like you've heard of, I mean, just last week I heard a kid say, you know, I really thought that my mom would be on board with this.
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
surprised that she wasn't.
Hmm. Hmm.
like all my life, she's been like, yeah, let's talk about it. And now all of a sudden it's like, no.
Right.
So,
Well, and I think it does. It scares us, and we come at it from a very different
mhm.
approach than we have in the past because we're
Yeah,
operating out of fear,
yeah,
right? Instead of
yeah,
recognizing again the sort of individuation opportunity to empower them
yeah,
to make healthy choices for themselves, and what
right,
does that look like,
right,
in a respectful way that
right.
invites them,
But
yes,
it
to
also
think.
has to do with, like, if you have a kid who's on the spectrum, or there are other considerations too as to how much you're going to be able to really get your get your thoughts in there and get your beliefs or information, you know.
Mhm, mhm. It's also important to know your kid.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I do think it's important that they know what mom thinks, that if mom thinks this is unhealthy or scary or,
Mhm.
that you do
Yeah.
communicate that somehow, right?
Yes.
But I, like you said, not in a way that I'm right and you're wrong,
Right.
you know, that that sort of
And
insults them. And
and I can also say that, like, I know from at least one situation where the parents did share a lot of information and did share a lot of, like, their anxieties. And the kid said, you know, I didn't like what I heard, but I put it in my back pocket.
mhm,
I put it away. So
mhm,
there's that piece of it too. There's really no wrong way to do this if it's
agreed.
being done from a place of, love and connection and care. Um, I think that in the end, if the child doesn't accept what you're offering in the moment, they might file it away for later,
Mhm,
for when they start teetering, if they
mhm.
start teetering. Um, you know, but they're not going to give you the gratification of changing their mind in the moment.
Right, right.
No.
I often think that's part of why my daughter continues to hang on, is
Yeah.
she doesn't want me to win. And so my
Yeah.
MO is to d take that out of the dynamic as much as
Yeah.
possible. So it doesn't feel like it's a contest.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Um, and sort of speaking of these other comorbidities, there's a question about that here as well that is, again is very related to this. Knowing that the child has untreated challenges like ADHD, depression. This is an adult child we're talking about now, 19-year-old. Would it be detrimental to the relationship to confront the 19-year-old with an insistence of abrupt halt on trans ideology and moving on with life? Especially this is coming from a parent who has never really insisted on anything with firm guidance. So this would be shocking behavior from the mother. So,
So, as I understand, this 19-year-old is saying that he or she is transgender and wants to transition medically. And the mom is saying, no, you have comorbidities. You will not proceed until these comorbidities are dealt with. So that gets into, like, a hairy situation, I think, because, one thing that the kid might come back with is, well, yes, it's because I'm trans that I have all of these, because I'm depressed, and once I transition, it'll all be okay. So now that's not going to be helpful. That's
mm-hmm,
not going to be helpful. I think that, like, if you can do it in a way that doesn't challenge their identity,
mm-hmm,
but rather saying, yes, I understand that you feel this way about yourself. But I also think that there are a few other things that need to be concurrently looked at. So if you can do it without, like, saying you have to stop with the trans thing, because immediately, as soon as you say that, they're going to be like, no, I don't.
especially
um,
at 19. Yeah.
yeah, especially at 19, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that the way to proceed would be, like, I really, um I really think that it would be helpful to you if you could maybe sort through some of this other stuff also, even as you think about transition. And with the hope being that like if they do deal with the depression and the anxiety and the maybe undiagnosed ADHD or ASD, that maybe that's going to put some sunlight between them and the trans commitment, the
Mm-hmm.
project. It might not, but as soon as you challenge head on the trans identity, it's not going to go well.
I love
Because
that because yeah, the word that stuck out there to me is the confront. And
yeah,
I always discourage confrontation because
yeah,
as soon as you
yeah,
confront somebody, they're going to dig in and defend their
yes,
position. Mhm.
yeah. Because what else can they do?
Yes. And it's human nature. It's what we do. Yeah.
It's human nature. Yes, it is human nature, unfortunately. And they're trying to individuate. They're trying to
Mhm.
separate. They're trying to do this as in an effort to become their own person. As misguided as it is, the impulse is natural and healthy,
Yes.
you know.
Yes. Hmm.
Um, that is completely spot on. It's exactly what they should be doing. That it's gotten off the rails for reasons beyond anyone's control is unfortunate, but they do need
It's
to
where we
individuate.
are.
It is where
Hmm.
we are. It is where we are. The other
Hmm.
thing is that very often, the other thing I've said is that if they might be doing this thing, this transgender identifying in an effort to save their own lives.
Hmm.
It's a
Yeah. Say more. Hmm.
yeah, I think that it gives them somehow it gives them hope that something can be better,
Yeah. I agree. Hmm.
and the idea of having that taken away from them is really unbearable.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, like we always say in psychotherapy, you don't take a you don't take a defense away without replacing it. It's like you can't
Hmm.
take that away from them without there
Hmm.
being something else in its place. If this is what they're using to keep
Hmm.
themselves alive and to keep
Hmm.
themselves whole, then
Yeah.
you cannot remove that from them
Yeah.
without building something else for them to land on. You're asking them to do something really difficult.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
you're asking them you're asking them to do something brutally difficult in letting
Oh,
go of.
that is so key. I love that.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes. Parents need to recognize what a difficult thing they're asking.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. If they could just let it, I mean, how many kids say, like who would want to be trans? Like, I don't, no one who would choose to be trans.
Hmm.
I mean, I hear that as who would choose to be so sad and so
Yeah.
hopeless. Who would choose?
I love that because I think what we've got to recognize is trans is code, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And we
yeah,
need to, when we hear trans, we need to
yeah.
think about what it's code for. So that's a
Yes,
great way.
yes, yes. It's code for like, I need something to be different in my life,
Yep.
and I don't know how to make that happen.
Yeah.
And this thing seems to be bringing me moments of hope,
Hmm. Hmm.
at great cost, but
Hmm.
still.
Yeah.
Imagine like if they feel like, they might really die if they don't do this.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and they're getting told that,
Yes, they're
so
getting told
yes,
that.
it's part of the narrative that they own right now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. One more related question. Any
Sure.
tips on maximizing conversations with adult children, especially when communication is very infrequent?
Um, I would say that like no matter what you do, keep it light and keep it happening. Like just keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
keep doing it, and like, bite your lip and send them the cute meme or the, you
Yeah.
know, if they, for example, if they ask for something on the infrequent chance that they might ask for something, like just show up with it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
if you can, if it's something affordable, if it's something small, just really, some of these kids, like even when they're adults, they're very regressed.
Mm-hmm.
In many ways, they need more care. They're like toddlers, really. they
Mm-hmm.
need
Mm-hmm.
they need a lot more than they are saying they need, or than they think they need. So they
Yeah.
really need that, like, I don't know, they need the Starbucks gift certificate, for example, so that they
Yeah.
can go get themselves warm coffee. They things like that, like small things like that, I think will go a long way. Um, if they're open to that, if they open up to that, if they're not completely estranged. You have to play by their rules. You have to play the game that they're asking you to play for now, because once they're medicalized, I think once they're really truly committed to the point of having medicalized, you're at a place where you're doing, harm reduction. At
Yes.
this point, you're doing
Yeah.
like maintenance. You're not, and it's going to be a while before they begin to question, because for a time they are reaping the benefits of
Yep.
what this is. And
Yep.
we don't know how long it's going to take. It's going to take
Mm-hmm.
7 years, 10 years. They might never get to a point where they're done with this, but
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be them being done with it.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. That's
it's
right.
it's not
Mm-hmm.
going to be it's not going to be you getting them to a place of being done with it.
And they're going to be more likely to be done with it if they feel secure enough, if they
Yes,
have a safety net. And
yes,
so, yeah, that's
yes,
why that
yes,
connection is so
exactly.
important.
Well, yeah, and I've always said that, the relationship, the family,
Hmm.
that connection
Hmm.
is the solvent that this thing has a chance of dissolving in.
Yeah, you said that in our main conversation. That
Yeah,
stuck with me. It stuck with many who listened.
yeah,
So,
yes,
yes.
that's the solvent. Work on that solvent,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it will, hopefully it will dissolve.
So that answer actually is great for this next question, which really resonated for me too. And seemed less connected, but now that you've answered the way that you have, I love that this is the next question. So I recognize that there are two opposite drives our kids have, especially kids like mine, to push far away, but to turn around and see if we are paying attention. If I
Ah,
act like I don't care or take a healthy distance, I think my kid will do something dramatic to pull me in. There is a desire for control of me and a constant desire to test whether I'm going to be there. My question is what to do with the contradictory forces, desires that our kids might exert. How do we engage without getting trapped in the push pull?
mm, that's a beautiful question.
Yeah.
It made me think of this this essay by, I think her name is Mary Catherine Bateson, and she is a daughter of the anthropologist Margaret Mead.
Mm.
And he studied, I, I'm not even sure now that it was her, but there was this study of moms and their kids in playgrounds. And so they would put down a blanket, and these kids were like, toddlers, a year, 2 years old, and they would measure like how the kid would turn around, like how often and how soon the kid would turn
Mhm.
around
Mhm.
and look at the mom who's sitting on the blanket. And the kids who are more sort of more securely attached maybe checked back once or twice, but then got left and
Mhm.
got lost in their play with
Mhm.
other kids,
Mhm.
or, whatever they did. But and the kids who were less securely attached were always looking back and checking with mom and checking, is it okay if I do this? Is it,
Mm.
I think that's kind of what you're asking, is that
Mhm.
I think the thing to do again is to secure the attachment. Um,
Mhm.
I think like work at the next level of abstraction, which would be rather than getting involved in the push pull, get involved in the sort of mutuality of things.
Yes. Yeah.
Sort of like, what's the bridge that they're trying to build,
Mm,
and sort of understand that and build that, you
mhm.
know. There, I mean, I think I would probably need a more specific example of how that happened. Like if I had a more specific example, I could maybe demonstrate what I mean by working at the next level of abstraction, not sort of like giving the attention and doing that, but doing it in a way that you choose rather than in a way that they demand.
That's what came right into my mind. Do it on your terms. Mm-hmm.
Yes, but on your terms.
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
and that's how you build the secure attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Mm-hmm.
secure attachment was ever there, that's going to work in your favor,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know. So these books have so much to teach us in a way.
Yes. Yes. Right. I mean, this is like
Yeah,
the context. Okay, you want to do all this learning? Let me give you this context to apply it all. Here you go.
yeah. And
Right.
it was important for the mom, like in this, for the moms to be on the blanket themselves and like doing their own thing,
Uh-huh.
you know.
It reminds me too of the work of a little bit of Jean Liedloff, who, do you know the continuum concept and the sort of in arms phase? And
I think I do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, kind of facing out in the,
Mhm,
like side by side with your kid
mhm,
instead of you
mhm.
guys, like always focused on each
Yes.
other,
Yeah.
have a shared focus out in the world instead of,
Well, that's
yes.
interesting because very often I will tell parents who are worried about, like, over the past weekend was Thanksgiving, and, parents are worried about, oh my God, kid who is trans identifying is going to come home. It's going to be. And one of the things I say is, find activities that are side by side activities
Yes.
rather than face to face activities,
Hmm.
but where you're doing parallel play almost. So like you're
Hmm.
watching a movie together, or you're rather than sitting at a restaurant face to face, you're
Hmm.
you know, you're going for a walk. Um, do things like that so that it's not the setup for the confrontation.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I think that's what I understood you were saying, is that get to a point where you can be side by side.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting that literal positioning, is so
Oh,
helpful?
absolutely. I mean, when we train in family therapy, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we do
Hmm.
things like like if you have a good supervisor, the supervisor will tell you, where do they sit when they come in? And the supervisor will say, well, I want, try putting so and so next to so and so next time, and putting so
Mm.
and so, and see what happens then. It's so
Hmm.
important. Like these like positionings, these
Hmm.
dynamics
Hmm.
are really
Hmm.
key. Yeah, very cool.
Okay. Yeah. Next one's um, thoughts on how sexual trauma, particularly assault at a young age by a male friend, plays into the trans ideology. To me, it's a protection, a disguise. My daughter has never got trauma therapy, and I see it at the core of the ideology and the distress. How can I make this connection for her? She isn't leading a healthy, productive life.
Mm. Depends on how old she is and like where she's at. Um,
I think she's 16,
okay. And there's
oldest
been
daughter.
there's been a clear trauma.
Hmm.
Yeah. And there's been no sort of sorting through that yet, as far as the mom
There's
knows.
been a lot of intervention, but I think mom feels like daughter needs more specific trauma therapy.
I mean, that would be a fine thing to do. I mean, I think EMDR is very helpful if that's something the child is willing to do.
Which is
Um,
key, right? Like daughter has to be open to the
yes,
intervention or it's not going to
yes,
work. Mhm.
yes. And so in terms of like the in the therapeutic situation, I would never actually, as the therapist, bring up the trauma. I would never say to a patient, you know, I certainly wouldn't say, do you think that your sexual trauma has anything to do with your trans identification? Um, because that is, first of all, that's not therapeutic. It's sort of like me imposing my own thoughts, and I think it would shut down the dialogue immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would, like I would observe, and I would keep an eye out for like certain subtleties and changes in the demeanor when we're talking about certain things. And then maybe, after a while, when there's enough trust and there's enough sort of connection between me and the patient, it might come up somehow. And I might say, I never thought to ask you, has there ever been, like, were you ever assaulted? Like, did this ever happen? Like, were you ever? And then, if they feel safe enough and they feel supported enough, and if they feel that answering that question isn't going to, again, threaten this identity that they've taken on as a way of preserving something,
Mm-hmm.
as a way of saving their own lives. If
Mm-hmm.
if what I'm asking isn't threatening that, then they might open up. They might say, yeah, well, this thing happened, and then they might shut it down and say, but I don't think that that has anything to do with me being trans, and at which point I
Mm-hmm.
would be like, okay, that's not even what I was getting at. But I'm just wondering, like, can we talk about that? And again, it might very well be that talking about that eventually, in addition to talking about many things, will create that solvent
Mm-hmm.
into which this identity, this identification might dissolve.
Mm-hmm.
They might be able to move on from it. But it's never, I want to stress that it's never one thing. I remember
Mm-hmm.
when my kid was involved in all of this, it's like, I know, I'll do that, and she'll, that'll work,
Uh-huh.
or I'll get her to
Uh-huh.
see this therapist, and that this therapist will, like, we're looking for that one thing, like, I'll get,
Yep.
I'll get her to talk about her, the fact that she didn't get into Model UN. And once she makes that connection, she'll let go of the trans thing. And it just, it's like, I'm so sorry, but it just doesn't work like that. There is not one thing it's not one thing that made them do this. And it's
Right.
not going to be one thing that's going to stop them, or that's going to pull it back.
Mm.
You know,
Yes. So important. Yes.
I
Yes. And I
mean,
think moms cling to that, and it's kind of back to what we were talking about before, that sort of grasping and attachment to the outcome, that there's going to be this one magic fix and we're going to find it, and she's going to
yeah,
snap out of this
yeah,
and we'll all get to feel better,
yeah.
you know?
There is no one thing. There's no such
Yeah.
one thing.
Yeah.
It's almost like, with the like when you're younger, when you're younger, it's like, if this boy dates me, I'll be happy for the rest of
Yeah.
my life,
Yeah.
or like,
Yeah.
if I lose 10 pounds, I'll be happy. It's that kind of a thing. It's like,
Uh-huh.
if we do this one thing, my child will, let go of this thing. That is so, and it's like, in a way, they're doing the same thing. Like, they're
Yes.
saying, if I do this one thing in
Yep.
transition, my life will be good. And we're saying, if you let go of that one thing, everything will be fine. So like, it's the rope in the tug of war, right? We're
It is.
both pulling at the same rope in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
Whew,
Mm-hmm.
so
I
hard.
know.
It's so hard.
It's so hard.
It's
And
so
it's a
hard.
marathon, like we've heard so many
Oh yeah,
times.
the marathon.
Yes.
It's a marathon, and it may be it's a marathon. And the other thing is that very often it might morph into something else, you know
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. So really reinforcing mom's work, getting healthy and whole, modeling how to do that, I
Yep.
think, for your kiddo, inviting them to do that, seeing their capacity, to heal and be healthy and whole, I think
Yeah.
is also really
And
helpful.
offer those things, like know where they are and offer those things that they can
Mm.
do, as opposed to offering things that you wish they would do.
Right, right. And modeling too, I think with them, like talking about the work you're doing, I think is
Yeah.
great as well. Like share that
And
you're
if they're willing to listen, that's fantastic.
right and key. And that's one thing I do also encourage, like get permission, for
Yeah.
almost anything at this age, as
Yeah.
they are becoming adults, it's respectful to
Mhm.
ask if you can share information or share advice or share wisdom, ask first,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Is it okay if I tell
Mhm.
you what I
And it's
discovered?
amazing how they respond to that because it is so respectful. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
mom's asking me
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
she sees
And it's
me she is growing up. Yes.
and
And
also like
capable.
cultivating a capacity for curiosity in yourself.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Like approaching it with curiosity
Yeah.
rather than with like a preconceived notion. And even if you have a preconceived notion, like try to suspend that
Mm-hmm.
for the greater good, for the sort of
Mm-hmm. Because they'll pick up on it. If you're not asking with
sure.
genuine curiosity, if you have an agenda, they know
Yeah. Yeah.
and they'll shut
Yeah.
down. Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I get one more in?
Yeah.
So this is based on the Gender Wide Events podcast interview with Maggie. I took away that she believes that trans is a communication, signifying that the kid wants something different from the parent and especially the mom. What are some steps I can take to figure out what that different thing is in my case, given that we have minimal conversation, even though my daughter is just 15 and still at home? She avoids my attempts for extending our chats, for example, by citing homework or the need to get ready for bed.
Mm,
Mhm.
that's a tough one. So you have to start very small and very simple. Maybe you can start with, I mean, it's really what are some things that you always kind of do would be something to look at. Like, do you always tell her to, you know, make her bed? Are you always harping about, clean your room? Um, like one kid told me, I really wish my mom would stop checking my grades every night.
Mhm.
You know, I really wish my mom wouldn't I don't know, like this, it doesn't even have to be like one thing, like the a big thing is what I meant to say. You know, like does my mom always, have to come to my room and say good night to me?
Mhm.
Maybe I can do maybe you can do something differently and say, hey, do you still want me to come and say good night to you?
Mhm.
And the kid may
Mhm.
be like, you know what? No, I would really like you to not do that anymore. And then take that,
Mhm.
you know, take that and say, okay, now we're getting.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I don't think there's a misconception. I think the misunderstanding that I'm saying that they want you to do something like really profoundly different. That may be true, but you have to show them that you're willing to do small things differently.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, like if I mean, for many people, it's really important for the family to always have dinner together at the same time.
Mhm.
You know, maybe you can demonstrate some flexibility by saying, "Hey, if you're not hungry right now, you can eat later."
Mhm.
Oh, and the kid will be like, "Huh, okay, no, I'll eat with you guys."
And what if the kid doesn't? What if the kid,
Then the
I
kid
think some
doesn't.
moms think that's a slippery slope. If I give a little,
What
mhm.
what choice do you have?
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, what
Mhm.
you've been doing hasn't been working.
Mhm.
The connection isn't being created.
Mhm.
And even in things like, I mean, haircuts, for example, haircut,
Mhm. Mhm.
clothes, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, I really think honestly, fighting over what clothes they wear and what haircut they get is a non-starter, So maybe if you've been fighting, Mom, I want to cut my hair. Mom, all right, go cut your hair. It's hair, it'll
Mhm.
just grow back, So there's that.
Mhm.
And someone cutting their hair does not make them the other sex. And in fact, they might realize that, oh, I cut my hair and nothing happened. It was a complete nothing burger, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's what I'm saying is, if just loosen a little bit,
Mhm.
in ways that like they have shown that they need you to loosen,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
if grades and like a clean bedroom are like, the most important thing, then you're going to have to rethink that because you're asking them to rethink the most important thing for them,
Mhm.
which is their gender identity right now.
Mhm. Mhm. So demonstrate,
So
model some
yeah,
flexibility. Mhm.
yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm. And a little give, right?
And a
Like
little give.
we
Oh,
are evolving this relationship. You are getting
that's
older. Yes.
yes, you're giving older. I trust you to be, I trust, like is things like tracking on the phone, like
Mhm.
are you tracking your kid all the time on the phone?
Mhm.
Maybe stop doing that,
Yeah.
which is really hard for some parents to do,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
these are the small things that, you know, give them some agency over their lives.
Yeah, I think they need to know that you trust. They've got the capacity to take on
Yeah,
life.
they can do hard things.
Mhm. 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 Well, thank you so much. This is a
Yeah,
great conversation. I look forward to publishing it. And you and I talked before we jumped into the Q&A about people who may want to work with you, that they can reach out to me, let me know, and I can then connect them to you, that your practice is pretty full right now, but that doesn't mean that spaces won't open up. And
right.
so,
I tend, as I said, I tend not to think of therapy as like a lifelong commitment. Um, I mean, I do work in a psychodynamic kind of way, which usually makes people think that it's going to be like years and years and years, but
mm,
not in this sense, you know.
right,
So
yeah,
that's why I do have some spaces opening up every month or so.
okay, great. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, it was lovely, Maggie. I would hope that we get to have you on again soon.
absolutely. This has been great. I love this conversation. Thank you for inviting me and for the
Oh,
work you're doing. I think
oh,
it's
thank you.
really taking the conversation to some important places.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
Mm.
thank you. I'm glad we're in this together, even, as painful as it is,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
it's bringing together amazing people, and we're figuring it out. It's what we do. It's what
I
humans
think so.
do.
Figuring it out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to the online community members who submitted questions for this Q&A segment. I hope you found value and strategies to support you and your family. Remember, you've got this. We've got this.